Okay, so it's Cold War time. We are looking at the following question. Explain two consequences of the election of Ronald Reagan. So Reagan's elected to become the President of the United States in 1980. He actually takes the presidency in 1981. So it's that early 1980s period. So we are going to look at two consequences. We're going to start with increases tension. So one of the main consequences, or the two consequences that we see with the election of Reagan, is that it increases tension between the superpowers. Now, why does it do that? Well, the first reason is because Reagan is an anti-communist. And he shouts about it, okay? He publicly calls the Soviet Union an evil empire. So it's the evil empire speech. And he positions the USA as the sort of force for good in the world. So straight away, they're getting off to a bad start. There's a lot of tension developing there. Secondly, he's got a new doctrine, the Reagan doctrine. Now, whereas before we've seen the Truman doctrine, which is about obviously containment, stopping the spread of communism, the Reagan doctrine is about actually going into communist countries and helping people to overthrow them. So, for example, we'll put overthrowing communist governments, e.g., example, we've got Grenada. So they send CIA troops into there to try and overthrow the communist government. As well as this, we know that Reagan increases military spending. So, in terms of defence, the Americans increase it by around $32 billion, which is a huge amount. And as well as this, their aim is to try and sort of show and to put a strain on the Soviet economy by outspending them. So by spending $32 billion, they are racing ahead again. They're creating a new arms race, a second Cold War. Now, it's not just the spending that increases, but there's also new developments. So we've got stuff like stealth bombers and the neutron bomb. The gap between America and the Soviets is widening again. Now, one more point that we're going to make is one that people tend to remember, and it's SDI. So the Strategic Defense Initiative. There's an S in it because it's American. Initiative, also known as Star Wars. And that's the idea that basically, and it is an idea, basically Reagan says that we've got lasers up in space and they're going to shoot down your missiles before they even, well, just after the launch really, you're so far behind, and it really scares the Soviets, thinking, oh my god, if these guys are here, then how are we going to catch up? Okay, that increases tension, but it's also going to have another impact on relations in a second. So if you just want to take time just to have a look at this, add these to a plan, and obviously any AO1 knowledge, make sure you're adding that in as well. Okay, secondly then, so our second consequence of the election of Ronald Reagan is that it actually, on the flip side, it also improves relations. So Reagan's presidency actually improves relations between the Soviets and the USA. So we'll start with the idea of the arms race. Now, we've just said that the Soviets realised that they cannot keep up. Okay, so the Soviets cannot keep up. They know that they cannot keep spending. Their economy is not going to let them spend to the level that the Americans are spending. So they cannot keep up. So they're going to have to take a different sort of tactic. All right, so it pressures them to negotiate, to sit down and talk and basically to change their policy. Now, as well as this, Reagan's presidency, he also builds up a really strong relationship with Mikhail Gorbachev, one of the final leaders of the Soviet Union. So, builds up a massive relationship with Gorbachev after Gorbachev's election I say election when he becomes the Soviet premier, he's not actually elected, after 1985. And what this means is they start to meet, they start to have summits, okay? So you get summit meetings, and that's all about reducing tension. So we've had increasing tension, but improve relations, they're meeting to try and reduce tension as well. So, 3 summits that the two are involved with. You've got one, we've got Geneva. If you remember Grimm's start, this is always really, really helpful. So, Geneva. Basically, this is about discussing an end to SDI. It's unsuccessful, but you can see that both sides, Reagan in particular, they are both talking about reducing the threat of nuclear war, which has obviously been a massive issue for many, many years at this point. The second one is Reykjavik in Iceland. Let me get the spelling of this right. Very difficult name. And this is where Reagan actually wants to end ballistic missiles or reduce ballistic missiles. Put BMs, ballistic missiles. The third one, because obviously after that, that's when we get George H.W. Bush, and Reagan's obviously disappeared by that point. We've got the INF Treaty, which is at the Washington Summit. Now, this is where there's actually an agreement reached in terms of nuclear weapons. The agreement is that weapons with a range of 500 to 5,500 kilometres are basically being scrapped. And that shows that there's improved relations because both sides are consciously making progress in terms of obviously reducing the threat of nuclear war, and obviously sitting down and talking, which is a lot more than they'd done previously. So there you are, there you have it. You've got 2 consequences there of the election of Ronald Reagan. If you can write about some of that stuff, if you can include some link phrases, which are obviously very important, and some specific knowledge, then there's nothing stopping you guys from getting 8 marks on that question.